So, for once I'm done with the we do, it's you do. The students will be working independently. I will first work with my guided group, and my guided group will be right now my students who are below level. Sorry. And we will read a guided book together that it was, I believe, a level B. And the students will read along with me since they still don't know how to read. They're at a level A right now, and we're reading a level B book. So we're working together into reading the story, and we're practicing like where the title is, where are the author, the title page, where do we start reading, and of course we read the story and we discuss about the story. What kind of story is it? Was it to inform or was it to entertain? Why do you think so? And students were there since it was about seeing animals. Like, I mean, yeah, I think it was about sea animals, and the students were able to respond about the different animals that live in the sea. And they were like, "Oh, it has a picture. I'm sorry, it has illustrations, but I'm learning something, so it's to inform." And I was like, "Great." So through there, I was able to practice with them a little bit and go over what it was. Then they finally got to, during those 10 minutes, my other students are working independently. These students will be working on the book we read, and they're going to be drawing a picture. As soon as we're done with the story, the students and the working independently on the differentiated worksheet I'm giving them using the same book that we read, um, they would receive this paper. It says author's purpose. They're going to write the book title, and then they're going to circle the purpose of this book, if it's to entertain or if it's to inform, and then they're going to draw a picture of why they think so. So one of my students drew a snake. Yeah, they drew a snake and they said it was to inform, to explain it. As an extension, I would have those students try to sound out and try to write by themselves. I know they still don't know how to, but they love to attempt, since everyone else is able to do it. Um, so while they're working independently, after I did the guided group, while they're working independently in their worksheet, I will be walking around and assessing my other students. Um, the other students will be receiving a differentiated worksheet. Of course, my other students who are working independently, who are below level, are also receiving this paper. It has the book title, like I said, entertain or inform, and draw a picture. My student who is part of this case study received this paper since she still doesn't know how to. She's able to copy words, but she's not able to try to sound out. And my focus for her is to try to push her now to try to figure out what word it is so she's able to learn the sight words. So she drew a picture, and then towards the end she sounded it out what she was trying to say. It wasn't all correct, but for an effort, she made an effort in doing so. Um, my students who are on level, they would also do this. They would do this worksheet, which is the book title, and they would circle if it's to entertain or inform. And they have a sentence starter by saying, "I know this because," and then provide an example from the book or even from the T chart that we did. Um, it had a table of contents. It provided information about birds or whatever it was. And then my students who are above level, they have harder books. So these students, I apologize for the picture, it went on the wrong side. But um, they write the book title, they write the author, the illustrator, because they know how to read already. They will circle what's the purpose of the book, and then they would say, what is something about this book that lets you know that? So they will not refer to the T chart. Instead, they're looking at what they learned in their book to help them. I mean, they can find if they have a table of contents, but for one of my students, they were learning facts about the rainbows. So I learned about how rainbows appear and all this stuff. So yeah, these were my differentiated worksheets. I also, during this time, I had these emoji cards. I wasn't able to bring one either. I do apologize for using my phone. But so I give them each of the students have these emoji cards. If I don't know if you can kind of see it, it says I'm stuck, I need some help, or I get it, I can do this by myself. So they're like kind of flipped. So I say stop, look and listen. All right, boy and girls, how are you feeling? And they show me the emoji cards. Through this, I'm able to do flexible grouping with the students I did not get to see, like instead of my guided grouping. And some of my students from the guided grouping still met because they were a little bit confused with their story. So I met with them at the carpet and discussed of what they were confused about, and that was my flexible grouping throughout the lesson. Um, sorry. So yeah, that was okay. So I provided formative assessment. They completed the task, their responses, and their shared discussions. Oh, as a closing, I always do this for every lesson. My kids enjoy sharing out what they had to say. So I have at least one student from each group, depending on the time, to share out what they did and how they to share out what they did. And the students will go to the carpet, and those 4 students will tell if the story that they picked was to inform, to entertain, or to persuade, and why it was. So like I said, for example, my one student was saying about rainbows. The story taught me about different how rainbows come and when they come and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, that's perfect. Through this, the students were able to self-assess themselves as well. They give each other red, green, yellow stars. If they're finished with their partner, they find a partner in their group to see how they did, and they discuss. This is extended as well. They discuss whether they were right or they made a little mistake and how can they fix it. And they would give each other blue, green, yellow, red stars. So extension, like I mentioned before, if time permits, I would have the students find a partner and discuss why they thought their book was to inform or entertain. Through this, students will peer assess each other by saying if what they circled was right, like I mentioned before, and why they thought so. They can refer again back to the anchor chart. Some accommodations I provided in my classroom was their independent work was differentiated based on their what they're able to do. I provided visuals for them throughout the lesson, and I assisted those students who were struggling. The student in my case study had a speech impairment, so I provided visuals. I also provided her the sentence starter. She was actually one of the students who participated in throughout the shared reading, and we were working on author's purpose. The author's purpose is to inform because, and she said it had a table of contents. She did not say it correctly, so I assisted her. I supported her by saying the word one at a time with her. So she got a little shy because it was a long sentence. I also supported her by having a differentiated worksheet. I know she's still not able to write very well, so I let her draw, and if we have time, I try to push her to write as much as she can. If she can't, it's not a big deal. For my English language learners, I provided visuals and repetition to assist them when working. If the students were not understanding, they were right next to the anchor charts, both of them, so they were able to refer back to them. For my informal observation, like I said before, they were answering questions about what the author does. They turned and talked and discussed the different books and authors the students write about. They responded to the shared reading with their partners and described what if it was to inform or to entertain and what they thought that. I provided many feedbacks. I praised the students for responding correctly and assisted those who may not be, who were struggling, and referring back to the T-chart. I also reminded the students to use the T-chart for assistance to respond to the questions instead of just getting stuck. For my formal, of course, it was the worksheets that I gave them. They were able to identify what type of book, and everyone had a different level book. That's also another differentiation. For that writing feedback, I was able to see if they understood or did not understood the concept after going over it, and I graded them by color stars. So my students don't know from 90 to 100 or 80. So we do blue, green, yellow, red stars. The blue is the student was able to respond correctly if their book was informative or entertaining and give a reasoning. The green was student was able to respond correctly if their book was informative or entertaining but did not provide enough reasoning. So they just told me, like one sentence instead of giving me a little bit more information, especially for my students who are above grade level. my students who received the yellow star, they were able to respond correctly, but they did not provide reasoning. So when asked to, or when they were writing, they did not give me a reasoning. And the students who received the red star, they were not able to respond at all or provide a reasoning. But no one in my class actually got a red star. I had a few yellow stars where they were just not. Some of it was because of language. They were not able to verbally explain why they thought it was to entertain or to inform. Um, so that was pretty much my lesson. I just want to go back to a few things I mentioned. So, as basing it on the book that we've been reading, Cook, Klein, and Chen, while reading this chapter, they said interaction is the first key to the development of communication skills. Throughout my lesson, I tried to provide as much as I could of communication from either peer to peer or peer to teacher for specifically my student, so she can get used to the vocabulary that was being spoken to, and she was kind of getting also an understanding of what was being taught in the classroom. This was on page 255. Another thing that I really caught my attention was using pictures representations. Cook, Klein, and Chen said the symbolic representation skill is obviously necessary for eventually development of literacy. Throughout my lesson, I provided picture representations, like just the pictures on the book or even on the anchor charts. Assisted her in knowing if it was to inform or entertain. As you can also tell in her paper, I had a picture to remind her inform is to teach and entertain is to like enjoy. So that assisted her as well. I also provided her, like Cook, Klein, Chen also mentioned in page 268, conversation starters. These conversation strategies are very important and help prevent overemphasizing the communicative function of requesting. So just these sentence starters assisted her in discussing with her peers, as well as when it came to for her to share out, she was able to use those sentence starters. Cook, Klein, and Chen also mentioned on page 257 that by modeling correct pragmatic skills, adults can direct attention to courteous, and effective ways of conversing. So modeling at the beginning of when I was doing my I do, I was providing modeling for her to see how I responded, how I did my think aloud. I was like, the author's purpose. I used the sentence starter that she was given as well for her to realize that's how she's supposed to do her sentence starter. They gave us some examples to use in the classroom, like listen attentively when she's speaking. Of course, I listen to her, make sure she knows that I am looking at her and I am interested in paying attention to what she has to say. I also, when I'm doing my lesson, I speak clearly and not too fast, especially with her since she's trying to understand what I'm trying to say. And I have a lot of English language learners that do not understand. So through the visuals and me speaking slowly, they're able to get an idea of what the lesson is about or what they have to do. I tried to avoid, number 3 was avoid long and complex sentence structure. I tried to avoid it, but for this lesson, of course, the sentence, for example, the sentence starter that they had to do was a little bit longer than usual. The author's purpose is and why. And yeah, so I also tried to have her like have as much conversation as possible because since she has, a speech disability, speech impairment, we're trying to have her get used to talking more and using the vocabulary we're learning so she gets an idea. And she has improved in like the last couple of days. Yeah, she did very well in this lesson and she actually really enjoyed it and was able to participate. She was actually one of the students in the closing and explained about her story, which it was an informative story because it was teaching her about things that happen in the rain. Thank you guys. I'm sorry if it's long. Have a good day.